What's going on, everybody? It's that time again. The AllSooners Podcast, episode 161 on this Wednesday, November 23rd, 2022, Thanksgiving Eve. Josh Callaway in Oklahoma City, Ryan Chapman in John Hoover in Tulsa. Gentlemen, how are we doing?
Excited. I got my last Monday, Tuesday in Norman, Oklahoma yesterday concluded.
Amazing.
So it's been 14 weeks of 14 weeks of grind, boys, and now we have one trip left. It is to Lubbock, Texas. We got to squeeze in Thanksgiving at some point, but yeah, we'll leave Saturday morning and go watch us some football down on the high plains of West Texas.
Yeah, I'm just excited that I'm in a much better spot today than I was 48, 72, any amount of hours ago. So happy to be back and not the dead weight on AllSooners anymore.
Yeah, Ryan is healthy. How are you feel? Are you back to 100% or just close?
Today is the first day I felt really close to 100% because yesterday I was okay to go to the press conference. I wasn't contagious. I could sit up for a couple of hours, do our, Venables vibes, our press conference notebook. But there was still the fog of the Dayquil, NyQuil on my brain. I didn't trust myself to string words together in a public setting, any of that. Today I'm feeling much better, much more like myself. So it's good news.
Good. Very good. Yeah, we happy to have you back and healthy. And it definitely hasn't set in for me that we don't have the press conference and stuff next week. I feel like next Monday and Tuesday I'm going to be just standing around my house at 11. Like, I feel like I should be in Norman. Yeah, you sold it short. 14 weeks. I mean, that you got all fall camp. I mean, we've been going to Norman multiple times a week since at least the first week of August, pretty much. So it's going to be weird, actually, next week. It's going to be strange. Basketball doesn't play at home either. Like, we have no reason to go to Norman next week at all. So it's going to be perplexing. I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. My car is going to be bored. No driving out of Norman.
Let's hope we don't have to go to Norman. If there's a reason to go to Norman, it'll be police reports and courthouse documents and crap like that.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And we'll get into that in just a moment. This squeaky clean season for the most part for Oklahoma ran into some trouble this week, but we'll dive into that in a moment. We'll start the show as we usually do. We'll dive into Bedlam final thoughts. Last week in this spot, that was my first chance with the West Virginia game because I didn't go to Morgantown. Now it's Ryan's opportunity because he was sick, didn't go to Bedlam. He had Ross there. So Ryan, floor is yours. Give us your Bedlam thoughts from afar. Did you watch the whole game? Did you make it through the whole game?
I did. There was the first couple of drives of the third quarter, I had to resort back to laying back down on the couch instead of sitting back up. And then as we started counting Wyatt Dillon Gabriel snapping the ball with 20 seconds left on the game clock while it's running, I was back up and what is going on? And just the confusion of the entire second half offensive experience is something. Now, only this Bedlam game this year could deliver a game which was far below expectations coming into it, with both teams being what they were. And then even in what should have been a Bedlam blowout where one fan base could feel great about it, both fan bases left this stadium with a bad taste in their mouth. That's just football in the state of Oklahoma in 2022. Good for the defense to show up and perform like that, especially with the circumstances in the second half. Just 2 weeks ago, we saw them have to stay on the field basically the entire second half and capitulate at the end, unable to get off the field for 6.5 minutes against that West Virginia offense. Different story, obviously, with now Spencer Sanders was more than happy to give them the football 4 times and try to give it to them 3 or 4 other times. But other than that, I think that all of the offensive saber rattling from the fan base this week has been warranted, because I don't know what that game plan was in the second half. And I know that we'll get into it. Jeff Lebby talked about it. Brent Venables talked about it. But for Brent Venables to not at any point step in on Saturday and say, guys, cut the crap, start running clock, that's a mistake. I don't care if you're a first-year head coach or not. You've been around football for 30 years. It shouldn't take that happening once for you to realize that you need to get on the headset and tell everyone to cut the crap and start to chew some clock.
Yeah, I completely agree, Ryan. nearly cost them the game. Okay. They won by 2 scores, right? But there's not anybody who was in that stadium or watching on TV who didn't think that thing was coming down to the end simply because of the number of possessions that Oklahoma State had. Oklahoma State had 19 offensive possessions, 19, which is mind-blowing. That's a ton. I don't know if you guys keep up with possessions, but 19 is an extraordinary amount of possessions. Why did they have 19? Because Oklahoma had 18 that were all about a minute. Each one lasted about a minute to a minute and a half. It's insane.
Crazy.
So we asked Jeff Lebby about it yesterday, Monday, and we asked Brent Venables about it yesterday, about the clock management. You know, he got a question about, Brent, do you get on the headset and remind your offensive coordinator? I got on the Monday presser with Jeff Lebby and asked him, what did you learn about yourself? What did you learn about clock management? What did you learn about play calling? He said he needed to be more aggressive, throw the football more often against a heavy box, you know, instead of banging your head against a wall with 7 or even more occasionally guys in the box. They're trying to run the clock down. But then he acknowledged there's a couple of times we probably should have huddled in the fourth quarter. Yeah, you think? You should have huddled a little bit? That was a little bit mind-blowing to hear that. Now, he said the words also, we threw the ball, or we ran the ball 16 out of the last 18 plays. Not entirely accurate with those numbers. I looked at it today. 11 of the last 18 were running plays. 11, not 16. So stretching the truth a little bit there, maybe to say that you called a running play from the press box, from the coach's box. You called a running play, but Dylan Gabriel got down under center or behind the center and said, we need to check to a pass. I mean, you can say you called 16 plays. That's accurate. But in terms of RPOs and options and check with me's and stuff like that the quarterback has to option out of plays or audible out of plays, 11 of 18 in the final two, quarter and a half doesn't cut it when you've got a 15-point lead like that. You've got to be able to drain the clock. I said this on my radio show, guys. As a head coach on game day, you have one job. You got to meet with the boosters, and you got to meet with the team, and you got to meet with the recruits, and you got to meet with the media, and you got to do all this stupid stuff. But what is your one job on game day as a head coach? Win the freaking game. Do everything you can to win the game. That didn't take place on Saturday. If they had lost that game right now, you know how mad this fan base would be at the head coach and the offensive coordinator? Furious.
No, completely. I mean, just peeling back, and we talked about it a lot after the game, obviously, Hoove, you and I and Ross, but peeling back from it and getting a chance to, it gets more bizarre by the day, looking at it, just how, and Ryan, you were joking about it with us yesterday at the press conference of, even on punts snapping it with 20, 30 seconds on the clock for just no reason.
Yep.
Just makes no sense. And so we'll see if Oklahoma can button that up. But yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, that falls on Jeff Lebby, obviously, with how quickly they were going, Dylan Gabriel. But at the end of the day, Brent Venables needs to just hop on the headset and say, hey, man, you got to take more time. Because we shifted to a point in that game where it was just, can you just use a couple minutes at least before you put your defense back out there? Like Hoop said, the vast majority of their drives were about a minute, which is just unacceptable in a game like that. And so it's a weird one. It's hard to know what to make of it for Oklahoma because on its nose, it's a win that you really needed, and you got it. You won Bedlam even in your most down year in 2 decades. So there's something to be said about that and be happy with it. You got to bowl eligibility, all that stuff, but you still leave with question marks. Now, the defense played a lot better, obviously. It's actually amazing the defense held that lead, considering everything we just said. So, I mean, that's the positive take from it. But some strange, just I don't even know the right word, procedural things. I don't know. Yeah, you know what I mean. Like it's just I don't know. So we'll see if that gets buttoned up. If it's a similar situation this weekend or in the bowl, or I guess next year.
It's okay to go 3 and out. It's okay to not get a first down. It is. You're trying your best. You're trying to get a first down. Somebody slips. Somebody drops a pass. Somebody misses a block, whatever. You don't have to go fast and go 3 and out. You don't have to go tempo and go 3 and out when you got a 15-point lead in the fourth quarter. That was just insane.
Yeah, I mean, you get 40 seconds 4 times. If you snap it with 5 seconds, even if you go 3 and out, if you run the ball 3 times, punt it, and you snap it correctly, you should run 2 minutes off the clock. Oklahoma did that once, and they scored a touchdown on that drive.
Yeah, Hoove, you brought up a dark alternate reality of if Oklahoma had blown that lead and lost on Saturday. I don't know where we'd be right now. Things would be on fire in Norman, Oklahoma, because, it's amazing. And Kirk Hershey pointed out yesterday in the CFP ranking show how many first-year head coaches, now not all of them are first-year head coaches like Brent is. This is literally his first job, but first spot at a new place, what they're doing. The top 10 or 15 is just littered with them, starting with the Notre Dame's ascension, but then the obvious ones, Sonny Dykes, Lincoln Riley, of course, Brian Kelly, Dan Lanning. I don't know if Oklahoma could have afforded another really brutal loss at home. So they needed that. You have a chance here to try and finish with some positivity. If your defense continues to play well, you win again. I think most OU fans have talked themselves into that. We're just waiting for Jackson Arnold, and the offense will be a lot better. But you need to see the defense progress, and they have. They undoubtedly have. So we'll see if they can keep it going.
I love what Oklahoma did on defense. They did some stuff different defensively than they've done previously. They ran some zone blitzes that they haven't run this year, and they ran some fronts that they haven't run. And Spencer Sanders didn't know what was happening. He was confused the entire game, or at least he was confused by where to go with the football. He thought he saw one thing, and it was something else entirely, and so he panicked, or he had to run, or he threw it away, or he threw it to the other team 8 times. 4 of those were caught. 4 of them were dropped. So you got to be happy with that if you're an Oklahoma fan. You got to be happy with the fact that Oklahoma did some things defensively, made some progress. But, guys, I tried to spin that on my radio show, right, on the Sports Animal in Tulsa with Sam Mayes. And Sam said, John, that Oklahoma State offensive line was a bunch of tackling dummies. They were not moving. They were not blocking. They were not doing anything. He wouldn't hear it. Now, he grades – he was a former Oklahoma State offensive lineman. He grades OSU's offensive line very harshly. But – he's kind of right. Oklahoma State's offensive line had a really, really rough night. But guys, I will say it again. Everybody has a good night against that Oklahoma defense this year. Just about everybody had a good night. Iowa State almost had a good day, and Iowa State is dreadful offensively. And they put up yards and they put up points. Not many points, obviously. But they moved the football, turned the football over quite a bit. So for Oklahoma to repel Oklahoma State's offense, which Oklahoma State puts up big numbers. They do. And Spencer Sanders is a dynamic player. He is. They've got some dangerous wide receivers. For them to repel them, 3 possessions they scored, 16 possessions they did not score. That's remarkable for this Oklahoma defense. That's unbelievable progress.
Yeah, OSU's offensive line obviously banked up and hasn't really played well for the back half of the year. Kansas has a awful unit offensive line wise. Oklahoma forced 3 turnovers in that game and still put 42 points on the board. The Jayhawks did. So it's a moving target. No one's holding this defense up as the 85 Bears. No one is certainly confusing Oklahoma State with an offense that is functional right now with that offensive line and how hurt Spencer Sanders is and his continued inability to diagnose any kind of different coverage that you've seen. But that's major progress for Oklahoma's defense from what we've seen them this year.
100%. If you're an Oklahoma fan, you just want to see improvement above anything else, and you saw it. So we'll see if they can keep it going. It doesn't mean as much if Tech scores 60, and then you get lit up in the bowl, but baby steps for Oklahoma defense. Let's go ahead and dive into what Hoover referenced earlier. So this Daniel Parker situation, it came kind of out of nowhere. I mean, he wasn't at Bedlam. There's just so much going on at Bedlam that, we knew he wasn't there, but there's just so much going on. You don't really think about it too much as far as what that could mean. And then this report comes out, Tulsa Worley, Oklahoman this week, that he's suspended indefinitely. Some serious legal troubles here. I'll let you have it handy for all the details of it, but not good. Daniel Parker looks like he's not going to be a part of this team, at least moving forward.
Yeah, I would doubt very seriously if he's involved with the Sooners for the rest of the season, not just this week, but bowl game or anywhere beyond.
Right.
Pro day, could this be hanging over him in pro day? You know what I mean? Nobody's going to want to draft a guy that's got this hanging over him in his 6th year or his 5th year senior. So yeah, the police report that I got from the Norman PD: domestic abuse, simple assault, and assault and battery with a deadly weapon. Those are the charges that were. I shouldn't say charges. Those were the those were the offenses that were levied against him. So he's not been charged. As of this morning, when I checked, he has not been charged yet. No charges have been filed. No arrests have been made. No warrants have been issued. So it's too bad. It's not what you want out of going into the transfer portal and pull a guy who's a kind of a fringe player to begin with. I mean, he was an important player for stretches this season, but a fringe player. And next thing you know, he ends the season like this. It's a stain on the transfer portal. It's a stain on Missouri. It's a stain on Oklahoma for getting the guy and checking into his character or whatever labels you want to attach to it, fair or not fair. It is what it is now, and he's been accused of this. Let's be 100% clear. He's been accused of this. This is all alleged. Nothing's been levied. Nothing's been filed. Nothing's been charged.
Right.
So nothing official yet, other than a police report was filed, and police are looking into it.
It's the first time we can kind of chart what the Brent Venables process will be at Oklahoma. It seems they were very on top of that suspension, as obviously he was suspended before it was reported. So it wasn't a wait for it to hit, oh, now he's suspended thing like that. I would imagine that the fact that he hasn't been charged yet and these are all alleged would be why it's a suspended indefinitely as opposed to a dismissed from program. And that if that comes along and then it's that cut and dry, then like we've said with a lot of things, the Cale Gundy situation, which is very, very, very different from Daniel Parker. But anytime one of these things pops up, it's the first time we get to see how Brent Venables and this program is going to handle these things moving forward. So this is now going to be the standard for when things like this happen, that they were very on top of the suspended indefinitely. And then as the next steps play out legally, we'll see what those next steps look like for Daniel Parker and his status with the team. I think we can all assume what would happen if the charges are levied, all that stuff, but not what you want, especially from a guy who that's what the process was, that basically Brent Venables didn't know much about him. So this shows you what the portal is. Joe John Finley had a year with him at Missouri. He vouched for him. And then you have something like this happens. It just shows you how touch and go relying on the portal to build stuff can be. And that's why Oklahoma wants to recruit big classes and keep those classes.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like you said, Ryan, I mean, obviously we saw how quickly and how swiftly Brent Venables acted in the Cale Gundy situation. Seems to have acted pretty swiftly here, suspended indefinitely and all that. And like I said, I can't imagine we see Parker again unless there is just a full clearance, falsely accused situation. I don't know why we would see him again this season. So we'll keep you updated on that. AllSooners.com. Whenever we know more, we'll let you know. On the injury front, Andrew Rame, didn't get an update on him yesterday. Now, remember, he warmed up in before Bedlam, was in full pads the whole bit, did the Dylan Gabriel and the Cotton Bowl situation. They didn't actually play in the game. It was a Rob Consul show. He tweeted yesterday that he had surgery, so he's hoping for a quick recovery. Don't know what that means for a bowl game, but obviously we can assume if he just had surgery on Tuesday that he's probably not going to be able to play on Saturday. So it's going to be the Robert Consul show again, you'd presume, in Lubbock. Certainly significant. I mean, it's one of Oklahoma's better offensive linemen, and obviously their center, the guy snapping the ball back to Dylan Gabriel, which Chef Levy admitted. I can't remember when that was. That last week, or was it just this week? It all meshed together. That is an adjustment when you have a different center.
Yeah, he said that Monday.
Yeah.
That he said it affects things more than you think, more than people realize. Getting the ball back there with a different pace, a different velocity, different location. He said you want it to be in the exact same spot every time you take the snap if you're the quarterback, so you get your eyes downfield, so you can get your feet right, so you can not have to think about your hips. If you're over here chasing a ball, or you're over here or down here chasing a ball, if you're doing all that, or it's coming really slow like some of Conjul's shots were, it affects the rhythm of the play. And I think that had a little bit to do with some of the Oklahoma plays offensively being thrown off on Saturday against Oklahoma State. Some of it, not all of it, some of it was due to weird snaps and different snaps. And talked to Conjul on Monday night, and he said, yeah, I got to be better. Got to get my butt down. Got to get, that got to get that fastball back there. Got to quit throwing knuckleballs. He said Rame throws a fastball, and if you've ever bent over and hiked the football between your legs, I used to do this in high school, and I taught my son's long snappers how to do it. 6th and 7th grade football, right? You get over, you bend over, you throw. You're throwing the football like you would like this, like a quarterback. You're throwing it through your legs. That's how Rame does it. Rame fires it like a spiral, right? Conjo doesn't do that. Conjo gets it and just kind of flips it, like almost like an option pitch going backwards. He just flips it. Yeah. So it's a different pace. It's a different tempo. There's movement on the ball. Sometimes it's coming in sideways. And poor Dylan Gabriel's back there going, whoa, big eyes and wondering what to do next. Hopefully Conjo gets that figured out, and everything, the operation runs a lot smoother. And because there were some problems, and he said he's been working on it in practice, and Jeff Lebby also said this is something we got to get fixed.
And your hope has to be that Conjo, being so experienced with the number of years he's played football, that he can digest a lot of the other stuff necessary in game prep, so that he can basically just say, this week, the biggest thing I need to fix is snapping that football. Texas Tech, they're really good on the edge, not as good as they've had a guy go down, which we'll talk about here probably the next segment. But for him, it's not like, oh my gosh, you've got Ika right in front of you from Baylor, right? That you're worried about that. Like, no, get the snap off, get everything rolling smoothly. Then you hope that Conj will be able to take care of the rest of stuff, because I thought his protection was fine outside of the snaps on Saturday night.
Yep, so we'll keep an eye on that on Saturday in Lubbock. But Andrew Rame, and we'll obviously find out more if he is any potential of playing in the bowl. You don't see a reason to push him for a bowl game, obviously, but we'll see. He tweeted that he hopes for it to be a quick recovery. So how quick is quick? We'll find out in due time. One last thing that I wanted to get into that Brent Venables said today before we shift over to full Texas Tech preview. I just think of his very stark opinion on opting out of the bowl. This is kind of reality in college football in 2022. Hoover and I talked about on the wrap yesterday. I mean, guys opt out. We saw it a lot last year. Benito, Jelani Turner-Yell, Perrin Winfrey, lots of guys. They choose to start their NFL. They get a jump on it. Obviously, you have the guys who enter the transfer portal, but I don't think that's really what Brent is talking about. He's talking about more about guys who are shifting to the NFL and not finishing the season, how he sees it. Then you have other guys like Kenny Brooks last year who, said there was no way he was opting out, even though that he did end up declaring. Caleb Williams, of course, kind of somewhat infamously or famously, I guess, actually did play in the bowl, even though he ended up transferring anyway. It kind of depends on the guy, but Brent Venables made it pretty clear, not a fan of it. So we'll see how that affects the team, but pretty stark opinion there from him.
Yeah, a little bit. For Brent, in Brent's case, you want the best players on the team, and you want them doing the thing that's best for them. And if your opinion is that that's best for them to play with their teammates one last game in college, in the Liberty Bowl or the Guaranteed Rate Bowl or whatever it is, that's going to serve Oklahoma football, and it's certainly going to serve Brent to have better players on the team, right? So the way he phrased it was, if you're a top 10 kind of guy, sure, I could see that. But we're talking about loyalty here, loyalty to the program, loyalty to the fundamentals, what we're building, all that stuff. I mean, it is what it is. Players are going to opt out, like a Marvin Mims. If he gets a second round, first round, second round, third round, even draft pick, a draft grade back, he very well could opt out. And if he does, that diminishes Oklahoma's receiver core. Brent Venables said it is that way. It's that way nowadays. People are doing that. He said it doesn't have to be that way. Some programs, it's not that way. So he's trying to sell right now, and you're always recruiting. You're always trying to get the best players, if that's the guys who are on your team thinking about moving on, or the guys who are not on your team looking for a place to go, whether that's transfer portal or recruiting. So it doesn't have to be that way, Brent says, but the fact of the matter, guys, it is that way, and it's going to continue to be that way. Yeah, it was just
old school football coach. This is one of those things that Brent Venables is never going to love. You know what I mean? And the reality is, if you get the program to where you want it to be, opt-outs are not going to be an issue because you're playing in playoff games instead of the Guaranteed Rate Bowl. Please, God, be playing in the Guaranteed Rate Bowl. So I think it's kind of a moot point. I also think it's one thing, like if a Jalil Farouk who can't go to the NFL opted out to then come back, yeah, that's an issue. That's not what's been happening though. And from a building the program standpoint, like let's take Eric Gray. For me, Eric Gray is the most obvious guy that you need to go to the NFL. And with how the NFL grades running backs, wear and tear is a thing. So you need to play as few games as possible. Isn't it a good thing for Oklahoma if Eric Gray just says, I love you guys, I'm going to go to the NFL, and then you can go through the entire bowl practice knowing that Javonte Barnes gets practice as the guy, and Gavin Sawchuk, welcome to the game plan. You can play in this game without burning your red shirt. Like that makes more sense for Oklahoma as far as being able to develop. A similar thing with Deshaun White. Great season for him. But now you get whoever you want at Cheetah. Pull your name out of your hat of the 80 names we've been given this year. But I would say Jaron Kanek. He gets to go through all of bowl practice as the one, all those snaps as the one. That would help Oklahoma more next year. So I understand the loyalty thing, and it sounds great and looks good on a T-shirt, bumper sticker stuff. Doesn't make any sense when it comes to winning games in 2023. So it's just old school football coach wanting to build that culture, which is fine. We all knew that that's the response Brent Venables would have, I think.
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, I completely. I mean, it makes sense. I get why you want guys to be loyal and to finish the season. I would get why Kenny Brookses of the world would want to play in the bowl game and finish their season out and all that good stuff. But at the same time, I also totally get why the Nick Bonitos and Perrion Winfreys of the world want to go ahead and get a jump. And I don't. If you're Oklahoma, you want to get a jump with your young guys. I mean, that's kind of a big a big plus of getting those extra practices and getting that extra game. So, I mean, in reality, the whole thing's a house of cards. In reality, Eric Gray shouldn't even be playing now. I mean, they're not in the championship chase, all that stuff, if you want to really poke at it. So, opting out of the bowl game is acceptable. It doesn't bother me. It's hard for me to sit here as somebody who just watches these games and covers them to say, yeah, you should go risk your whole career potentially in what is an exhibition game. It is, and you can use it as a jumping point to your next year. I don't think bowl games are completely have no use at all. I do think it can really jumpstart you into your off season, but that doesn't mean diddly for the guys who are leaving anyway. So, yeah, it doesn't bother me. I think Brent's just got a little bit of an old school take on it, like Ryan said, and it's just kind of how it's going to be.
Unless you're Braden Willis and you say that thing what he said this week where in a year or two they're going to win the national championship. Sure. I'm not going to be here, but I will look back and say I had a hand in that. So there's a pride factor. And then there's something else too. Every player has his own internal motivation. Every player has his own desires and what he wants to do, what he wants to achieve, what he wants to be remembered for. In Eric Gray's case, he's having a hell of a year, right? Why not tack one more game onto that, stack those numbers up? I was on a call to decide the Football Writers All-America team. And, the writers from around the country, there's like 16 of us, and this guy pitches this, and this person pitches that. And pretty soon there's all these names, and we're all considering. And somebody said, Deuce Vaughn from Kansas State, and Deuce Vaughn, don't get me wrong, hell of a player, unbelievable talent. But they were like, Deuce Vaughn's had this year and this, he's done this and he's done that. And I got my computer open and my stats, and I looked and I said, Eric Gray's had a better year than Deuce Vaughn. He's got more rushing yards. He's got more catches, more touchdowns, more receptions, more yards. I was like, wait a minute. If we're doing that, I got one. Yeah, Eric Gray's. And they were like, oh, yeah, they didn't think about Eric. It's true. You don't think about Eric Gray, but he's had that kind of year. Now, what kind of year does he want to add to that? I'm sure he would like a couple hundred yards in a bowl game, in a meaningless bowl game, stack that thing up to like 1,500.
100%. He's on track to get in the top 10 OU single season rushing yards of all time. If he gets the bowl game, if he plays the bowl game, he definitely probably gets there. If he doesn't, then he would need, I think I'd have to look at the math. You need a big game in Lubbock. So we'll see how that shakes out. I imagine we're going to find out pretty quick. I mean, after the game on Saturday, I imagine probably in the next day or two afterward, we'll know if guys are going to play in whatever bowl game it may be there at the end of December. All right, we're going to take a time out here. We'll come back. We'll dive into the Tech game this week, regular season finale, the Red Raiders and the Sooners in Lubbock. We're all going to be there. We'll preview the matchup next right here on the AllSooners Podcast. On Twitter, you can follow AllSooners at @all_Sooners. Ryan's at _Ryan Chapman. Hooves at John E. Hoover. I'm a Josh M. Callaway. Our website is AllSooners.com. We are a Fan Nation affiliate, part of the Sports Illustrated Network. All right, regular season finale on Saturday, Oklahoma and Texas Tech. It's a 6:30 p.m. kickoff there in Lubbock. Earlier in the week, the forecast was like 68 and sunny all day. It then shifted to like 48 and a chance of snow. So I'm just kind of doing a weather blackout until like the day before, because clearly it's not trustworthy right now. So we'll see what we're dealing with up there. Right now, I have OU listed here as a 2-point favorite in Lubbock. The Red Raiders are also 6-5. They've had kind of a pretty good first season, I guess, under Joey McGuire, who's also one of these first-year head coaches. They've been pretty much competitive in all their games outside of getting blown out by Baylor a few weeks ago. They've been really good at home. They beat Texas at home this year. They also beat Kansas at home this year. They beat Houston this year. I mean, they have some solid wins under their belt. They're a solid team, not amazing, certainly not a bad team either. They're also going to be going bowling, so we'll see where they end up in their bowl game. But feels kind of similarly to what we were talking about just a couple weeks ago with West Virginia game, honestly, where coming into that game, West Virginia had some good games, some not so good games. They've been a lot better at home. That's kind of how I classify Texas Tech. And obviously, we remember how that West Virginia game went. So we'll see what happens on Saturday. But last game of the regular season, some initial thoughts on what this game could look like and what Texas Tech is exactly, because they're kind of a hard team to get a read on.
They are absolutely a hard team to get a read on. I'm looking at their scores right now this season, 5-1 at home. So that's something that doesn't bode well for Oklahoma. But you look at they're 4-4 in conference play, which is a game better than OU in the standings, right? So you look at their wins. They got a couple of close wins. One's over Texas, and one's on the road at Iowa State last week, 14-10. So a 3-point win over Texas and a 4-point win over Iowa State. And then their other two wins were blowouts. Their losses were either blowouts or close, 1.5 type possession games, 9 points. I think one was 10 points. They lost to Oklahoma State. So they're absolutely a hard team to get a read on. They've had quarterback problems all year from the very first game, whether it was Tyler Shuck or Donovan Smith or whoever, guys in and out of the lineup. We saw last week where both those guys got snaps. Both those guys played. So I think Shuck got all the quarterback snaps, all the throwing, but Donovan comes in and runs the Wildcat stuff. Hard team to get a read on, just especially offensively. Defensively, missing Tyree, man. Geez, what a blow that is. First team All-American defensive end / linebacker, edge rusher, 6'6", 270. Projected as a first-round draft pick. He's not going to play. That's a tough blow for those guys as well.
That's a huge blow to a Texas Tech defense that if you haven't been paying attention and you go, wait, this group can actually generate some tackles for loss, some sacks, things like that, because it's not what Texas Tech has been the last 10, 15, 20 years, it's felt like. But, yeah, I think this team is as up and down as, like you kind of mentioned, Hoove, the quarterback. If Shuck throws the ball 12 times on Saturday, Texas Tech will have had 3 quarterbacks who had 100 or more passing attempts this year, which is just nuts.
Yeah.
Absolutely nuts. Sir Roderick Thompson is still there. So if Donovan Smith and Sir Roderick can get it going on the ground, then that's kind of what I'm looking at defensively for Oklahoma, because when they've really struggled, it's been Kansas State rushing attack, Texas's rushing attack, Baylor's rushing attack. TCU's really the only one that really abused Oklahoma through the air with a bunch of coverage busts, things like that. Teams have had success, but as far as just absolutely pouring it on. And then you look at West Virginia, what aspect of the games where Oklahoma kind of lost the plot? When Garrett Green started running the football. So if I'm an Oklahoma fan, I'm not as worried about Shuck sitting back in there. He hasn't been incredibly accurate, 4 touchdowns, 2 picks. So it's not like he's taking care of the ball, things like that. I know he's efficient as far as his yards per completion when it does get there, but it's not getting there as much as it does with the Donovan Smith. So for me, if you're an Oklahoma fan, you hope that Shuck is the guy for a majority of the time. That's just the most traditional look that OU's really, their pass defense has come a long way as CJ Colden's come on and the safeties have gotten healthy, all that stuff. It's if Smith comes in and Joey McGuire realizes, hey, the best thing to do is attack this Oklahoma defense by air and on the ground, that's where I think things get hinky for Oklahoma.
Yeah. And what I regret about this game, Tyree Wilson gets injured, broke a bone in his foot. Again, projected first round pick. He opted out the rest of the season. He's not going to try to play. He's not going to try to rehab, or he's going to get surgery. He's going to get it fixed. He's going to get ready for the draft, and he's going to come back better than ever. We are robbed of a fantastic matchup between him and Anton Harrison. And I told Sam on the radio this week, I said, man, I bet Anton Harrison's taking a deep breath. And he's like, if I'm Anton Harrison, I want to play that kid because playing that kid is going to raise my draft stock. So, yeah, that's too bad that we're not going to get that individual matchup, man. That would have been good.
Definitely. Yeah, and Texas Tech, to Ryan's point, they've had 3 quarterbacks play pretty extensively this season because you had Donovan Smith and Shuck, like as mentioned, and then also Baron Morton has thrown for over 1,000 yards, and Roderick Thompson is, like Ryan said, still there. Feels like he's been there forever. And then Taj Brooks. So a decent little running back duo there. They're kind of just, you look at their numbers and they're kind of just very evenly spread out. Like they don't really have go-to guys anywhere, even at quarterback. But they have guys who are capable. So we'll see. And completely agree with Ryan's point. I mean, the quarterbacks who have proved that they can't really move, or they're at least not as mobile as other ones, have largely, that's when Oklahoma's made their hay. I mean, you look at what they did to JT Daniels, forced him to get benched in that game. I mean, last week, Spencer Sanders a little bit hampered, not quite himself. He had a rough go of it. Earlier in the season, Casey Thompson had a rough go of it. I mean, so we'll see what approach they have. But if they put Donovan Smith out there and he's just kind of running around, that's where Tech is going to probably have a chance to have some success. Because, I mean, not for nothing and not to just rip the guy, but if Garrett Green is tearing you up, then anybody who can move, you feel like has got an ability to tear you up. So we'll see what that looks like on Saturday. What's the biggest key for Oklahoma in this game? I mean, what do they definitely have to do if they're going to get in out of Lubbock with that 7th win? Is there anything that jumps out to you guys that circle it? If they don't do this, they're not going to win.
Josh, you mentioned the weather, man. If it's blustery,
Changes
if it's snowy or whatever,
yeah.
they need to run the football. They need to get the ball, as Jeff Levy said in Morgantown, get the ball out of Dylan Gabriel's hands. If he's back there throwing it, trying to throw it all over the yard in the 4th quarter or whatever, and they need him to throw it, that means they're in trouble. If he can throw it 20 times or less in bad conditions, if the conditions are good, then you play it straight up. If the conditions are bad, then run the football, give the football to
I think that's the key, and I think it's the key actually for a different reason. This Oklahoma defense, we talked about it a ton. They faced 102 snaps on Saturday. Brent Venables highlighted, which I think will be the key number again, that Texas Tech has hit 100 offensive plays 5 times this year. OU's defense doesn't have the depth to, for my money, hold up for that another week. I mean, if you go and look the videos of, you guys on the field for that last play of the game, stuff like that, go look at Josh's highlights. That's a defense that didn't even have the energy to celebrate at the end. So the running game needs to get going, if nothing else, so that Oklahoma can recharge a little bit. And that way that defense can try and build on a pretty solid last 2 games.
I got 46-degree for the high in tonight game, so it'll be lower than that, with a 50% chance of snow right now. When I checked last night, the snow chance had kind of gone away and the temp had gone up a little bit. Now we're back to a little lower and the snow. So, like I said, weather blackout until Friday. Now, the weather on Friday looks like it's definitely going to be bad. So, silver linings, the game isn't being played isn't a Black Friday game because it's like definitely going to snow on Friday and be pretty cold. So we may be out of the worst of it by the time Saturday night rolls around. We can hope. What about Dylan Gabriel in this game? He's had a weird year. I mean, that first quarter, little nugget from Mike Houck, football SID, while we're waiting for players on Monday night. Dylan Gabriel set the single quarter yardage record for Oklahoma on Saturday. That's insane, but he did nothing the rest of the game. Nothing. Diddly. Couldn't move the ball at all. He had like 30 passing yards, completed 1 pass, like Hoover said, in the second half in that game on Saturday. What are we expecting from him? Because right now, it's like flip a coin on what you're going to get. Not even game to game, but like drive to drive, quarter to quarter.
It's something that we haven't seen a lot of for sure at Oklahoma. The fans and certainly we as the media, when it comes to covering these things, been a little spoiled by elite quarterback play. We've said that a lot. Remember when Jalen Hurts was breaking records? Okay, remember when Baker Mayfield was breaking records, and then Kyler Murray came along and broke all those, and then Jalen Hurts, like, what? Jalen Hurts, most yards off total offense and most yards rushing by a quarterback and all this, and you're like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Let's just tell it like it is. Lincoln Riley had a way with quarterbacks. Spencer Rattler was really good for large stretches. Caleb Williams comes in, is really good for large stretches. Well, guess who's not coaching quarterbacks right now? I'm not laying it at Jeff Lebby's feet. I'm just saying that hate me if you must, but that quarterback guru that they had is not here coaching the quarterbacks now. It's just a mortal quarterbacks coach, and his name's Jeff Lebby. Inconsistent. Strikingly inconsistent from not just one game to the next, but one play to the next. I mean, he'll drop an absolute dime, and then the next play he'll miss a guy by 6 yards, and you're like, did he get his hand hit? Did his feet slip out from under him? What was that? It's bizarre to watch, and like I said, we're not used to seeing this kind of inconsistency at the quarterback play at Oklahoma.
I'm going to go back to the weather report. I know weather blackout, but the near freezing temps plus about a 10-mile-an-hour western wind, that to me says that Dillon Gabriel is going to be up and down. Because, guys, I think another thing is I just don't think his arm strength is there compared to some of the other guys that Oklahoma's had the last few years. And I think that he's talked about, he's not really wanted to address it about playing in the elements and all that stuff. He's not using it as an excuse. I think after Bedlam is the closest anyone kind of got to him talking about it's been an adjustment, but throwing in wind has been a problem for Dillon Gabriel all the way back to the spring game. It looked ugly, and that was more wind than really they've played with it most times this year. In Lubbock, that thing kind of swirls down there. And if I remember correctly, I'm not expecting any sort of consistency from him quarter to quarter as he battles the wind, frankly.
It definitely gives you a big appreciation for those guys, Baker and Kyler and Jalen Hurts. Even more so for me, at least, than what Lincoln Riley did, just because, I mean, look at last year. And I know he's a true freshman, so it's not a totally perfect comparison, but Caleb Williams, if you guys remember, he threw for 87 yards against Iowa State last year in the second to last game. 87. Now, they won that game, amazingly.
Well, but remember, Josh, Lincoln Riley was not coaching him at that
way
point.
Way checked out by then. That's a fair point. That's a fair point.
Just saying. Baylor, Iowa State, Oklahoma State, Caleb Williams did not get coached to look at his numbers.
Right before the bye, 402 yards against Texas Tech. After the bye, he didn't throw for that hardly total in the last 3 games of the season.
Yeah, I wonder what the delineation was. I wonder what happened during that bye week. What could have possibly happened? Where could Lincoln have possibly been?
And yeah, way more boring than you think. That's what he said, right? When he got back there on the following, and he wouldn't tell anybody what he was doing.
Yep.
And then you add all this inconsistent quarterback play from Dillon Gabriel, and I mean, close your ears, I guess, OU fans for a second. Caleb Williams looks like the Heisman front runner right now, potentially. Spencer Rattler just threw for 6 touchdowns against Tennessee.
For sure.
And Tanner Mordecai is going pro a year early. All these guys who were at OU recently are thriving at the moment. So it makes it worse. So we all agree. We all feel the same way about Dillon Gabriel. He can be good, but he has to give it to you more consistently. So we'll see what happens on Saturday. It's definitely, as the weather's gotten colder and it's gotten a little windier, he hasn't played as well. And that was a fear coming into the year. Some people brushed it off like, no, like he's Hawaiian and played at UCF. Like that's not going to, you're just reaching, and it's kind of playing out. As the weather's gotten colder, he has not been as good. So we'll see what happens on Saturday.
Yeah, you're right. I'll take you back, though. As early as the Nebraska game, I believe, he was missing wide open receivers, and we were like, because it was one of those things. It's like, look at so-and-so's wide open. He totally missed him.
Remember.
Yeah, that too. But it was Kansas State. It was at TCU, and then he got hurt against TCU, and you're like, boy, he's missing a lot of receivers. it wasn't like a weird thing. I mean, he's continued to do that all season. I know he's trying hard, and I know listen, we all like the kid. We all like what he stands for and how he represents himself. Nobody's knocking Dylan as a person, but as a quarterback, he comes out of those games and he's like, I wish I had that one back. You can offer criticism. He's not the worst quarterback we've ever seen. Come on, you guys, leave him alone. Stop pounding him over the head. He's
did you
he's
see
a
the
good
games where he was
college
out?
quarterback.
Did you watch those? The Texas game?
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, come on. This team would be 0-12 right now without Dylan Gabriel at quarterback.
Literally, they probably would. So we'll see if he bounces back on Saturday. Last thing, and then we'll flip over our last segment. We'll have our
Oh, hey, real quick, Ryan brought up a great question at Texas against Texas and Dallas about quarterback development. Has that gotten better? You know, the backup guys were not developed because maybe they were putting so much emphasis on Dylan Gabriel, right? Got to get Dylan back in the groove of my offense and, UCF, and we were together for a year. And so so they ignored the backup guys' development, or maybe the backup guys didn't develop like they should have. I don't know. But just in terms of since the Texas game, has the quarterback position been developed?
Yeah, I mean, he looks like the same guy.
I think that's a fair question, Ryan. You want to tackle that?
The exact same guy. He's just dealing with better defenses because he wasn't playing UTEP, Kent State, and Nebraska, right? And tougher conditions as far as the weather, things like that. It was almost, for the Kansas game, he looked more relaxed, and it wasn't anything different about his performance. Again, I talked about a lot that a 3-loss team, the pressure was off. It looked like the first time that Dylan Gabriel was settled as the quarterback at Oklahoma. And then as people got excited again, he wasn't asked to do much against Iowa State. So I don't really think that's a quarterback development thing. That was a game plan thing, but same issues were there against Baylor. They had to take the ball out of his hands in the second half in Morgantown. And then outside of a quarter, the offense did not run on Saturday against Oklahoma State, against statistically the worst defense in the conference.
It ties back into what we talked about last week too. I'm very surprised that Brent Venables was so pounding the table that they're not going to add a quarterback in the transfer portal. I think you definitely have to add one. He just hasn't done enough to guarantee himself that job coming back next year. I think you add a quarterback if you can find one that's starter quality, and him, Gabriel, Jackson Arnold, can throw him in there. Anybody else? Open competition next spring and fall for who? I mean, that job should not be handed by any means, in my opinion. So we'll see how he plays on Saturday. He can stay wind and cold and a fan base that's going to be on top of him. We've talked about it many times. Lubbock is a scary place, and we're going to be there on Saturday. Last thing, and then we'll flip the page to the last segment. We'll have our official picks on Friday on AllSooners.com. But yes or no, does Oklahoma win this game on Saturday?
I'll go with a shaky
answer is
yes. No. Flip that coin, baby.
I don't think so either. I think no, but we'll see. I mean, I have till Friday to lock it in officially, but right now I feel like it's hard to see it at the moment. All right.
Yeah, I haven't had turkey yet this week.
I gotta get some turkey
what's
and mac and cheese and mashed potatoes in my face before I. Are you guys mac and cheese on Thanksgiving? Some people like
mac and cheese anytime.
Hell yes.
And any kind of potato dish as well, as for any form of potato side dish. I'm also firing that up. Yeah.
I'm a recently converted GBC
I'm out
fan
on that
too.
One. I know that's sacrilegious for some people, but I'm not a GBC guy. I'm not a stuffing guy either, which people get on me about that as well. But it just
I think the only two things that I'm not anti, they're just not for me, is I'm not a cranberry sauce guy on Thanksgiving, and I just don't like pumpkin. So pumpkin pie or anything is not my bag. My girlfriend, she brought a pumpkin pie to like our Friendsgiving, and she's like, "You want to try a slice?" Yeah. And not realizing like in the moment that, oh, it's pumpkin pie. So I'm like, no. I'm so like, sure. And I take a bite and I'm like, oh, it tastes like pumpkin. That's for sure. It has all.
Both of you guys better steer clear of the Hoover household. We have all four of those things as sides.
I'll mow through the GBC. You guys can have more pumpkin pie. It's a perfect trade-off.
I'll tell you, I'm not really a big pumpkin pie guy either. I sound like I don't eat Thanksgiving food based off this conversation, but I just load up Turkey, mashed potatoes, rolls, and mac and cheese. That's all you need. You pile it on, and you just go from there. That's my system.
Why Josh hates
Josh,
Thanksgiving?
just
We'll
give
talk
me
about
all
it
your
after the break.
starches, please.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. All right, we'll take one last time out. We'll come back. A few last things to get through. Big recruiting week already for Oklahoma. It's going to get bigger. We'll dive into that. We'll also give a little basketball update as well on the way out in the final segment of the AllSooners podcast. Final segment of the AllSooners podcast, episode 161. Send you on your way into your Thanksgiving weekend, and then weekend up there in Lubbock. Final game of the regular season already. It's nuts. It's crazy. We've come so far. Wrapping up our second year as a trio. Still have the bowl game, of course, but we'll finish things up in Lubbock on Saturday. First time the three of us actually together since what game? The Baylor? No, Iowa State. Yeah, no,
Iowa State.
It'd be Baylor, yeah.
Baylor, yeah, because we.
It was Baylor. It was Baylor.
I didn't go to Morgantown. Then Ryan was sick, so we've been kind of off our rhythm. But we'll get it back on track in Lubbock.
So this is a overused cliche, but I think I can appropriately say this: covering a college football team, covering a beat closely like we do. I've never run a marathon, and I would have no chance of ever finishing a marathon or even training for a marathon, but I got to think it's a lot like running a marathon where you train for it, you do all this background, you do all this research, you do all this prep, and then you run it. And while you're running it, you're like, oh my God, is this ever going to end? This is killing me. And then when it's done, you're like, oh, that was only 3 hours. Yeah. It's already over. You look back on it and it's like, dang, yeah, man, it's been a grind covering the team this year. And if you consider where we came from 1 year ago this week, fellas, the grind has never subsided at all.
Because it went straight from, Josh talks about this a lot, but literally we were crawling into bed about 5 a.m. on Sunday morning after Bedlam. And we were crawling out of bed about 9 a.m. as Bruce Feldman is doing the USC is targeting Oklahoma coach Lincoln Riley. And we're going, wait, that's like the Woj tipping picks thing. That like when you see that targeting, that means the hire is happening. It just can't be official yet.
Yep.
Then straight into Venable's staff, portal season, the first off season, summer with Schmitty, all that.
Caleb Williams, mania.
It'll be nice to have a month or two maybe where we can be like, whew.
Yeah, it's going to be.
Portal season starts Monday, guys. We're not going to have a month or two
it's
for
going to
anything.
be chaotic.
Portal season starts Monday.
The portal's going to be nuts again, like it was last year. But it's so hard to replicate that, the Lincoln leaving and then the Caleb Williams mania and all that. Like the bar is. It's going to be high, but that bar is so up there that we can't even hit it probably. So it's going to be a fun time. We'll see where we end up in our bowl. We've been speculating a lot, and there's about 15 possibilities. It feels like so. We'll be keeping up with that in the week ahead. A bowl projection from Brett McMurphy, Action Network, had him in the Cheez-It Bowl playing Notre Dame. I didn't have that even remotely on my radar, so it made me rethink everything I thought about the bowl season. So we'll be keeping up with that as we'll see where the Sooners end up.
Well,
sure.
Are we going to go into the bowl speculation? Let's do it as long as we're there. Brett McMurphy, Notre Dame, sure. Cheez-It, okay. Not really a big fan of Orlando this time of year. It gets a little crowded for my liking.
Because I'd be on board for that.
Yes, boxes and boxes. Bro, I got a box in the mail as a football writer's voter. I got a box of 2 boxes of Cheez-Its in the mail last December. Like, okay, sat there and ate Cheez-Its right out of commemorative box. The one that we've seen probably the most of is Liberty Bowl in Memphis. And who would be the opponent, or who would be an attractive opponent, but good old South Carolina Gamecocks with Shane Beamer and Spencer Rattler and Austin Stogner. That could be entertaining.
Yeah,
Ryan, you saw some other
too,
information in terms of bowl speculation.
Texas Bowl, played in Houston. Texas Bowl, excuse me. That's also a Big 12 SEC tie-in. So there's 2 avenues for Oklahoma and South Carolina, or I've seen Oklahoma and Mississippi State in the Texas Bowl, which obviously first matchup ever between those 2 schools, but the leak stories leaking out everywhere. But The Big 12 does not bind these bowls to say the first place team has to go to the first bowl. The second place team has to go to the second bowl. Someone's got to go to the Sugar Bowl. That's it. Outside of that, the bowls have the authority to say, we are picking whoever we want. We just have to pick a Big 12 team. And while more times than not, that goes chalk, there's been speculation that if USC loses to Notre Dame and then loses to what we're assuming is going to be Oregon if the Ducks take care of business in the Pac-12 championship game, a 3-loss USC tumbles to the Alamo Bowl. If Oklahoma can beat Texas Tech this weekend and go 7-5, yes, they would be jumping people. But the Alamo Bowl had one of their highest attended games last go around for an opt-out city bonanza just because they got to cash in on Oklahoma fans' one last ride with Bob Stoops. You're telling me that the Alamo Bowl is not going to sit there and think really hard about this game is going to sell out? There are going to be OU fans that go to San Antonio just to try and boo the hell out of any USC or Lincoln Riley. That's going to be a very hot ticket, and the Bulls are in it for the Bulls. That might be really hard for them to pass up, even though Oklahoma's 7-5 and we'd be jumping up above some other records.
USC fans would sell their ticket allotment. So there'd be 48,500 OU fans down.
OU would take over that thing, and it would be mayhem, and we would enjoy it. And if you guys remember, if you weren't with us last week, we covered the Alamo Bowl, and it's how all the bowls are, but the press conferences are all joint. I mean, we got to talk to Oregon the whole time, so we would get Lincoln and Caleb Williams regularly that week, and that would be insanity.
Reading with Alex Grinch, considering the last interaction he had with the OU press corps at the airport as well.
God.
That's right. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Would that be fun to cover or what? Because as a reporter, you would just throw caution to the wind and just say, this is a nonsensical question. Lincoln, why did you leave the way you did? Alex, do you regret joining? Just go right at them because there's no repercussions. That's the other team's coach now. So you don't have to come back to Norman with your tail between your legs getting scorned by the head coach or the defensive coordinator that you got to cover for the next 3 or 4 years. Right?
So we would just take over their press conferences, basically.
I just, with everything inside of me, a special teams blunder that proved costly for the Trojans, I'd be like, Hoof. You have to, Hoof. You have to ask the question.
Sign me up. Lincoln, do you regret not hiring a special teams coach this year? Because last year's in the past.
It's your responsibility to the college football
world. I'd go
world.
down that path. Absolutely.
We'll definitely find out.
Right.
Oakland fans are rooting against USC anyway, but maybe even a little more so with that potentially on the table.
What if we enlisted the OU Daily guys to go watch USC practice?
Yeah. Who will be the starting quarterback, guys? We need to know.
Just do it. Just report on anything. Just peeking over the fence. Even if they're like open practice, they have to watch it from looking over the fence.
Not just the OU version of it.
Yeah. Listen, USC, when OU played them in the Orange Bowl and well beyond, they had a SID who was legendary, Tim Tessalone. And he would just – it was his show. He would open practices. We got one-on-ones with Pete Carroll if we needed him. Talk to Reggie Bush over here on the side after practice. I was like, what? This is what? You're doing what for us? That's how USC used to be. I got asked when Lincoln went to USC. I got asked by the USC, one of the Fan Nation USC writers. So Lincoln's going to open up practice, right? You're going to keep practice open? Like, no, you're going to be living the nightmare of your dreams. It is, he is going to close practice. And he has absolutely, because the guy retired, Tim Tessalone retired, and then Lincoln showed up and closed everything down. And it's like, everything's different now. Not even Snoop Dogg gets to come to these
Matt
USC
Liner
practices.
And a very familiar carpool karaoke guy is all over the place, though, with Matt Liner recreating the Bush Push this week for social media.
It would be fun. It'd be amazing. It's probably a pipe dream, but it would be amazing. And Ryan and I talked about it in the car on the way back, I think from the Iowa State game. Just you hope that obviously you want it to happen at some point, obviously, but you really hope it happens either this year or next year for the Caleb Williams angle as well. But we'll see. If OU could play USC at some point, that'd be amazing, obviously. So we'll see how this shakes out. Lots of bowl projections. Like I said, there's like 10 different possibilities. That does get narrowed a bit. I feel like if they lose on Saturday and they're 6-6, but we'll find out. We'll reevaluate maybe next Wednesday as to what the latest is going into championship weekend. All right, recruiting. Yeah,
that's next. Let's see. We've got this weekend, and then I think
Next
I
Sunday.
made a reference earlier to Sunday.
Sunday
We don't find out this
playoff.
Sunday. We find out the Sunday after the conference championship weekend. Right, yeah. So playoff, TCU going to the playoff probably, right? We're all kind of in agreement. They're not going to lose to Kansas State in the Big 12 title game, are they?
Quarters, because they might.
It could absolutely happen.
That would be very on brand.
Yeah, exactly. So if that happens, if everything shakes out chalk, TCU to the playoff, Kansas State to the Sugar Bowl, and then the Alamo Bowl gets to pick, right?
And it'd be between pretty much OU and Texas, really, be the conversation. But if it's USC, you have a hard time believing they wouldn't take OU. If it's not USC, they might go Texas, just because they're a better team this year. But
would USC have the ability to decline the bowl invitation, knowing that they're going to pick
playing
Oklahoma?
Texas or Baylor, or actually Lincoln doesn't want any part of Dave Aranda. We're playing Texas.
Lincoln did all right against Texas. Yeah, he'll take that one.
And then we'll do the 2005 Rose Bowl redux.
Yeah.
/ Caleb Williams versus Texas part 2 after what he did last year. The storylines are plentiful if we get the right matchups. So we'll see how it checks out next Sunday when all the bowls are announced. Yep. Recruiting wise, Oklahoma, good week already. We talked about it, after the game on Saturday. Hoover, Ross, and I. It was a million recruits were there. It was a huge recruiting weekend. They're reaping the benefits already. They've had 2 commits. Brent Venables kind of outlined it all. Who had a story on it? I recommend you go read that story and watch Venables. It stressed me out, him explaining what a recruiting weekend of that magnitude is like, because it was, how did you get ready for the game, basically, is kind of was my thought when he was outlining it. But they've got 2 commits this week already. Yeah. We'll dive into each one here briefly for shifting some other things to wrap up. Ashton Sanders was the first one. He committed on Sunday. He committed, he's from California. Was he even home? I have a hard time believing he had even made it home from Los Angeles. 3-star defensive lineman, 6'1", 270 is what he listed on 247 Sports. Committed to Oklahoma on Sunday. This was their first get of the post-Bedlam. Solid pickup here. You can see his tape. He's very disruptive. He's big and strong. He's one of these guys that you're banking on Todd Bates and Brent Venables and Jerry Schmidt getting a hold of him and making him higher than what he – it's the whole point, but making him take some big strides, I feel like, is where you kind of stand with him.
Yeah, 6'1", 270, powerful guy, short, run stopper. You would want him around 300, 305, I would think, with a lot of muscle on him, get some of that freshman baby fat off and that kind of thing. Yeah, he's a guy that committed. I think he committed in the locker room after the game. He was so excited about what he had seen and the offer that he'd gotten, that and the NIL collective that's popped up and is raised over $1 million in just 9 days. Recruits are looking at that stuff now differently than they did just last year, just even 12 months ago. So a huge recruiting weekend to have that many guys, 36, 40 guys, whatever the number was, that the final tally. And so many 5-stars, in that group. But Ashton Sanders, he's not waiting around. He committed immediately. The offer came earlier, and he decided he likes the LEDs. He likes the crowd. He likes the fans. He likes the program. He likes the stadium. He likes the facilities.
I think it's really interesting,
everything
too,
about
that
it. So
what
congratulations
he's
to
done
Ashton.
and what the next commit that we're going to talk about here in a second. You start looking at the numbers. That's a hefty, numbers-wise, defensive line class. And the Sooners are still trying to chase down David Hicks as well. Obviously, the number 1 defensive lineman in the country. I think that there's a big emphasis on if you're not going to have to hit the portal for depth guys and things like that, you need to take a lot of those numbers. And when you've got Jerry Schmidt and Todd Bates and Miguel Chavis, like we're going to talk about here in a second, taking a guy like Sanders and saying, this is one of those gyms that you feel like try to put some weight on, coach them up. They can be in that rotation here in a couple of years. Just a very different approach from Oklahoma, because feels like this kind of recruit probably wouldn't have been a take under the new recruiting style that Lincoln Riley had brought in toward the end, which was the quality over quantity and everybody else you'll find in the portal. So I think it's just very fascinating that Oklahoma continues to add numbers in and looks to try to build this to be, again, if they hit their home run with David Hicks, who will be a take. If he wants to come, he'll be a take, right? They're going to have a pretty hefty defensive line class here in 2023.
One day later, they made another addition on the defensive side with Taylor Wine, who's a three-star edge from Nolensville, Tennessee. 6'5", 235 is what he's listed at on 247 Sports. His tape is awesome. He's very disruptive. I like his potential a lot. And looking at what he did out there in Tennessee, he's big and strong, athletic. There's one play in his highlight reel which I recommend you go watch. You can at least get a little bit of a taste of what he's like, where a running back gets around the edge and he just chases a running back down. I mean, just a monster running a guy down the sideline, 40, 50 yards down and catching him from behind. I mean, that's not normal. I like his upside a lot. Good get here for Oklahoma in Taylor Wine. Two commits in 2 days.
Yeah, Taylor comes in at 6'5", 235. That's what his high school height and weight is, or his camp height and weight. Sooners will probably want him to play at around 260, 265, maybe even bigger at 270. If Brent Venables wants to play that three-man front and play it effectively, he's going to want a big, huge, disruptive, long defensive end, edge rusher like that. Is a possibility he could play that stand-up position as well, being 6'5". It's a little easier to get off the ground when you only have when you're only in a 2-point stance than a 3-point stance. Four-man front, you're going to want defensive ends that are slightly smaller. A three-man front, you're going to want defensive ends that are slightly bigger. But you're right, Josh. He's got incredible athletic ability, incredible ability to move quickly around the edge, around the blocker. He's got long arms to engage and disengage all in one quick motion from the offensive tackle. And he was offered the day after Oklahoma lost the flip from Colton Vasek from Austin, Texas. When he flipped to Texas, Taylor Wine was offered the next day, and all it took was getting him in town for the Bedlam game and impressing him. If you follow recruiting, you follow the guys, the reporters who do recruiting for a living specifically, you know that Taylor Wine is probably possibly severely undervalued as a 3-star. They expect him to be elevated to a 4-star very, very quickly. Colton Vasek, of course, was a 4-star that a lot of people thought played like a 5-star. So that's, if Taylor Wine gets his 4th star, I think that'll be something that helps satisfy, losing Vasek and getting the people interested in that position.
The way for sure. Everything you said, who totally agree
loss.
with. And he just seems like a guy to be a candidate of get on campus, immediately start the process of getting stronger. And then based off of if they're going to kind of play him a little bit slower, like you've seen with a couple of the freshmen, he'll have time to dictate what role they want to try and use him in this defense. And that'll dictate whether they're trying to put 15 pounds on him, 30 pounds on him, all that stuff. So that Jerry Schmidt will have a plan, be working really closely with Brent Venables to get the best out of him. Because like you said, Josh, he's explosive. He flies off the tape as like a guy like, oh yeah, you don't need to put the ring around who you're looking at here, because he's the guy that's just moving bodies and running people down left, right, and center when you watch his highlight tape.
Yep, so already 2 commits from that big Bedlam weekend. More are expected, so keep up with us at AllSooners.com for the latest on that front. Signing day less than a month away. That'll probably be the next time we have a press conference at the stadium with Brent Venables, as December 21st, whenever these guys will officially sign for the early period to get to be there in spring ball. From future Sooners to former ones in the NFL ranks, the big winner of the weekend was Samaje Perine. Joe Mixon goes down. Perine steps in. How crazy is this for the Bengals that Joe Mixon goes for 5 touchdowns? They have a bye week. They come back from the bye. Joe Mixon gets hurt, and Samaje Perine catches 3 touchdowns. That's insane. They're just the all OU backfield. Good for Samaje. I mean, a guy who people weren't sure what kind of NFL career he would have, and he's latched on with the Bengals as Mixon's number 2 there, and that's working. Working very, very well. So he's the big winner of the weekend. Anything else that stuck out to you from guys from NFL Sooners over the weekend?
How about Jalen Hurts? We talk about him every week,
Yeah.
but this time 17-16, I think, was the final score. He goes into the end zone on a rushing touchdown, leads his team down the field. You're seeing a grasp of the offense. Okay, you're seeing a rapport with the receiving core and the offensive line. Okay, he's got a great offensive line, good receiving cores, but he has a command of that offense that's pretty rare. Now you're seeing him execute in 2-minute offense, game-winning drives, clutch plays. It's like, is there anything this kid can't do?
He's in a bounce back spot after the game against Washington. And then, I mean, CD's Cowboys beating Minnesota so bad that they had to take that game off of national TV when it wasn't zoned specifically for the Dallas market. That's always going to be good news as Dak and CD Lamb get back on track there as well.
And I'm with you, Josh. I was surprised to see, of all the OU running backs that have come out of the NFL in the NFL draft and done well, Samaje Perine is the one that catches 3 touchdown passes.
Obviously, it's been the situation for a few seasons now, but it's still just amazing that they have Joe Mixon and Samaje Perine as their number 1 and number 2. And Bengals looking good. Obviously, Super Bowl run last year, and kind of starting to find it a little bit right now. We'll see if they can do another run like that for those former Sooners running backs trying to get themselves a championship this year with Cincinnati. Shifting over to basketball to wrap up here, and we'll send you on your Thanksgiving weekend. The men squeaked out another win last week, another close call, another nail biter, but they did win against South Alabama last Friday to get to 3-1, 3 straight wins after that debacle of the opener against Sam Houston. They're now in Florida, getting ready to play in the ESPN Events Invitational starting on Thanksgiving, 4 o'clock tip tomorrow against Nebraska. So we'll see what they can do. Another close win. I feel like we're going to learn a lot more about them this week, playing some not top-of-the-line competition, but Power 5 teams at least in a neutral setting, multiple games, 3 games in 4 days. We're going to have a much better idea if this team is capable of doing bigger things than last year, or if it's, maybe they need to have some more work to do. We'll find out more here very, very soon.
OU Nebraska on Thanksgiving Day. What more does Sooner Nation want, right? Maybe not. Wrong sport. So I asked Porter Moser earlier in the week about chemistry and how important chemistry was to this team and, what he's trying to do. Chemistry is a lot easier to build, he said, when you win those games, those close games, than it is if you lose those close games. So they've got some things fixed. They've got some chemistry going. Listen, my prediction for this basketball team for this season, they will go as far as
I think that they also need Joe Bamisile
I love watching him play.
Suzan to keep coming on strong as a couple of guys off the bench, because the way that this lineup is constructed, there's going to be nights where the starters aren't getting it done just because of people trying to attack the Groves Bros and Jalen Hill. There are going to be some mismatches in the Big 12 with size and things like that. That that, right? Going in with kind of an undersized front court like that. So it'll be interesting to see if Uzan and Bamisile can continue to take those steps forward. If Bamisile can continue to get Moser's trust defensively, and then Uzan just as a freshman coming in, those guys can continue to come along. That's going to give Oklahoma a lot more options and a lot more ways to get to the rim, score points. Otherwise, I think once you start to get into the meat grinder of the Big 12, it's going to be does their opponent get to 60? Yes, that's probably a loss for the Sooners.
Yeah, and the women are the complete opposite of that, as we'll shift over to them to wrap up. So they lost last week to Utah, and they lost big. They gave up 124 points to the Utes out there. Now, this was on a back-to-back. We talked about it last week. You don't play back-to-backs very often, especially on the road like that in elevation. And Utah's good. I mean, they're in the top 25. They lost big. We talked about it last year. The way they play is prone for this to happen. They happened a couple times last year. Obviously, the NCAA tournament, Notre Dame beat them by a million. Happened a couple other times over the course of the season. They've since bounced back with 2 wins against UT Arlington and Arkansas State. But I was texting with Ryan last night. I couldn't believe that they dropped them out of the top 25. From 16 all the way to unranked after beating BYU, who's good, losing big to Utah on the road on a back-to-back, and then beating UT Arlington. And they went from 16 to unranked. That's nuts to me. But whatever. I mean, it's early in the season still, 5-1. But a little disappointing, I think, to have people kind of give up on them, I think, this early after that big loss.
Yeah.
Seems that way.
I think the women's poll's a little more volatile than the men's poll because not as many people follow it, or maybe the people who do follow it are just not as many of them. But yeah, beating BYU the night before, right, and then you knew that it was going to be a tough ask to do that, to come back and play in that elevation in Salt Lake City against a top 25 team. That was too much to ask. And frankly, how good, we have to ask. I mean, how the Oklahoma basketball team is good. How good? Are they elite good? I think we found out in the Big 12 tournament last year, not really. NCAA tournament last year, not really. And it's the same players. All the same players are back. So that's something that and you don't want to be out of the polls this early, because in a sport that's not all that visible, like women's basketball, it's getting more visible, but it's still, right now, it's still gaining traction, you could say.
Yeah. Well, I think
you don't want to be out of the polls early because it's going to be tough to get back in.
Night 2 of a back-to-back in the elevation to go back and play well. No top 25 team should lose any game by 46 points. It shouldn't happen. And I get that that's your style, is that once you start shooting, if it's not going well, the other team's going to cash in, all that stuff. Okay, well, they need to have a plan B. And you might not win on the plan B, but you need to have a plan B where you're not losing by 46 points, because the game against Baylor was not 40 points in the Big 12 tournament, but it was not close. There was not a moment after halftime where you felt like Oklahoma was going to even hang around in that game. And then the Notre Dame game, it felt like you took all this goodwill of hosting in year 1 of Ginny Baranczyk, the NCAA tournament, and it all just slipped away because it was such a huge loss. Got to find a way to say, okay, you're not shooting very well. Where's another way that you can come back and win? Yeah. That's what the great teams can do, as opposed to just being a really fun, good team.
You guys remember that Kansas State game last year where they lost by 50, and Ioka Lee, is that her name correctly? She scored like 70 points or whatever it was. The way they play, it happened a couple times last year, and you've already seen it once this year. Just kind of their style, like Ryan said, you got to find a way to not have that happen, because this has happened a few times under Jenny Baranczyk, who's been great, and that program's gotten way better since she took over. But some really just ugly losses, losing by 40, 50 points. I mean, come on, you can't have that on a regular basis. They play Wednesday against Northwestern State back at home next time they get back to action. All right, that's it for us. Everybody have a good Thanksgiving. We'll be in Lubbock this weekend. Looking forward to that. Wrapping up the regular season, which is insane. Like we said earlier, finishing up this season. We'll be down there, so be sure to catch all our content, AllSooners.com, leading up to the start of that game on Saturday night. And then we'll be that might be a card pod situation. We'll find out. It's going to be a late night in Lubbock, but we'll evaluate late Saturday night. Either way, though, you can catch the post-game show on iTunes, Spotify, Google, iHeart, wherever you get your podcast. If you have an Amazon-enabled device, just say, Alexa, play the AllSooners podcast. It's also posted on our website, AllSooners.com. Click on the playlist on your phone, your tablet, or your computer. You can watch the shows on Who's YouTube page, John Hoover Media. That's it for now. We'll see you on Saturday from Lubbock. For Ryan Chapman and John Hoover, I'm Josh Callaway. We'll catch you guys next time.